What's up, fight fans? Welcome to Fight Nerds episode number 16. My name is Flyin Brian J. With me once again, my good friend, and I really love doing podcasts with him, Mr. All That MMA himself. It's Wesley Riddle. What's going on, Wes?
Nothing much, man. Just hanging out, trying to enjoy the day a little bit, trying to relax a little bit. Had a kind of a busy day, but and a busy week ahead. But I'm looking forward to talking about this fight card we have ahead, and I think talk about a little bit of what we saw on the Mayweather-McGregor thing that happened a little bit earlier today.
Yeah, so if you didn't know it, fight fans, what we're going to do, Wesley and I, we're going to go over our picks for UFC Glasgow or UFC Fight Night 113 happening this coming Sunday live and on Fox Sports 1 with the early prelims beginning at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Fight Pass. Then after two fights, we move over to Fox Sports 1 where we will spend the rest of the night. The prelim portion of FS1 is starting at 1 p.m. Then we move to the main card at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. But before we get into all of that, we're going to talk a little bit about Maymac. So I know what kind of fight fan you are, Wes. I know you're all in on everything to do with mixed martial arts. And while this is a boxing contest, it's going to take place on August 26th. Today and yesterday and tomorrow and the next day, the Maymac World Tour has been going on and will be going on. Tonight they stopped in Toronto, and basically tonight's press conference was better than yesterday's, right? What were your takeaways?
That's what I thought. I got a chance to watch a little bit of yesterday's. I didn't see it live, but I was able to have a chance to watch most and pretty much everything that happened live for this conference. I kind of like it. I feel like they both are trying to hype up the fight a little bit more. I feel like it's trying to I mean, I didn't really have a lot of expectations coming in. I think we can all kind of agree maybe what we think the outcome's going to be or what the likely outcome's going to be. But I enjoy that these two are hyping it up. I kind of like the fact they're trying to show some animosity towards each other. The press conferences were interesting, I thought. I kind of enjoyed some of the trash talk that was being said by both ends. I felt like it was pretty flowy in the way that they were able to come up with some pretty witty stuff off the top of their heads. But some of it could have been pre-planned. But then again, the crowd was really into it. A lot of the people that were into it, watching, people in the Twitter world, and also just pretty much Mayweather and McGregor themselves. I thought that some of it was repetitive from what we saw the first press conference, especially more towards Mayweather's end. And that's not me being a mixed martial arts fan. That's just saying that Mayweather pretty much kept saying every single time hard work or yeah, or 21 years or all work is what. I mean, it's pretty much kind of repetitive and consistent. But then again, whatever you can do to sell yourself and sell the fight, I think they're doing a good job of that so far.
Doing a great job, man. And I, too, am worried that it's going to get repetitive and redundant over the next 2 days. But you know what? Fight fans are going to tune in to watch it. It's going to be some of the most watched sports entertainment that's not an actual sport, it's ever happened. They're just on stage talking smack to each other, talking smack about Mayweather. I have money. Conor McGregor calling him a bitch and saying he can't read and shit. That's going to be happening for the next couple of days. A lot of people are going to tune in. My favorite part, and this is me being a mixed martial arts fan, Wesley, is the fan chanting for McGregor and telling Floyd Mayweather to pay his taxes. So I love that almost the entire crowd was pro McGregor and anti Mayweather. So it feels like more pro MMA than pro boxing.
I agree with that, and I felt like a lot of it too, maybe because people are more invested in seeing Mayweather. Not Mayweather, but McGregor make a boxing debut against such a high caliber name. While Mayweather, I feel like a little people are less tuned in just because he's coming back and has already had a pretty prestigious career. But then again, if you kind of look at the followings, I feel like there are more serious and devoted McGregor fans than there are serious, devoted Mayweather fans. And maybe, again, that's because Mayweather hasn't been competing for the past couple of years since he beat I can't think of his name off the top of my head in his last fight. But since he got his last victory inside the boxing cage, I think he fought after that. Pacquiao was his 48th win, and his 49th win was his last one before his retirement, which he got a pretty decisive win.
So is that why he wore the hat that said 48 rather than 49, because nobody remembers his last fight?
No, the 48th hat is actually significant. It pretty much represents the highest paid fight Mayweather has ever been in. He received $300 million in that fight, which is the most he's ever made off a boxing fight in his career. Okay,
still, I thought he should probably wear a hat that either says 49 or perhaps 50-0, but he wore one that said 48, and I didn't really get it. You mentioned that maybe McGregor has a larger following than Mayweather. Perhaps, but I think what a lot of it is even the people that follow boxing that want to watch Mayweather's fights even cheer against him in the boxing fights. So they're going to, even if they're a boxing fan more than a mixed martial arts fan, they're probably going to cheer against him no matter what.
Yeah, and I can kind of see that. And I think a lot of it's too, if you think about these two individuals, this is kind of some of the stuff that they've been able to accomplish in their careers. They form and have formed quite a bit of a hatred base just because they're very good at trash talking. But then again, one thing that's big about it is that they're great at backing it up. And I think that that's one thing that we can see in the fans. There's such a difference in kind of what we're cheering for and what we're wanting to see. I mean, I'm not buying into the fight. I think we kind of know what the outcome of the fight is going to be. I think you and I can maybe agree on that. And I think we know what the possibilities are for Conor if he's ever going to be able to get a victory like that inside of a boxing match. But I enjoy, like I said, the trash talk, and I think they're doing a fantastic job of it so far.
Before we get any further, I forgot again, if you're watching the show live right now, or if you're watching the show on YouTube or Facebook right now, and you don't want to look at our ugly faces, or at least mine, I know Wesley's pretty, but you can subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Player FM, Google Play, iVoodoo Radio, TuneIn, all of it. Wherever you can find a podcast, you can find MMA Mania. Just search for MMA space Mania, and you'll find us. So, Wes, the last thing I want to touch on, Ryan J., who's watching us live, thanks so much for hanging out, brother. He asks, and this is kind of a loaded question. I don't know how honest we could be, even if we were to have an answer that would be, unfavorable to the law. But will you buy or stream the fight? He's thinking about streaming it. He's surprised Mayweather can read numbers. But basically the question is, you going to buy it?
Man, if it wasn't as much as it is now, I probably would consider it. Maybe if it was the price of a UFC pay-per-view. And I'm saying that just because it's not what an authentic boxing fight could be. And when I say authentic, I don't really mean in the fact that, well, this is a boxing match, but it's not something like we saw where, I don't know, where we saw Klitschko in his last fight. That was one of the greatest fights I've ever seen. Even though he wasn't able to get the upper hand in that fight, it was just fantastic to watch. It was pretty authentic, pretty raw material. And I felt like that was kind of the fight in a boxing fight that's worth kind of more bit of money. I'm probably going to go to a bar like Buffalo Wild Wings if they show it. If not, I'm going to, let's say, watch it on my laptop.
I would buy it if MMA Mania makes me do a post-fight show for it. Well, my hands are kind of tied, but if I can find some buddies to go together with me and I don't have to do a post-fight show, so I get a, drink a little bit with my homies, maybe smoke a cigar or some shit like that, I don't know, then I would go, 5 dudes could pay $20, and that would lessen the load for me. But if I'm not doing a show and I'm watching it by myself, I mean, $100 is a lot of money to pay by myself to watch it. And where I live, they normally don't. There is no sports bar that shows MMA pay-per-views. Maybe they'll show this because it's going to be the biggest pay-per-view event of all time, probably. But I don't know. I'm basically between a rock and a hard place. I have very minimal options. But then again, since it's going to be such a high rate of purchase, I could probably find a group of people that would let me go over and watch it with them. But, man, I hate watching combat sports with casual fans. Why are they clinching? What's going on with this? Somebody looks stupid. Like, just shut up and let's watch some people punch each other's faces in. All right, sorry. That's basically it. Let's get into our predictions for UFC Fight Night 113, hashtag UFC Glasgow. Gunnar Gunny Nelson versus Santiago Genchiboa Ponzinibbio is the main event, and we're going to start at that fight and work our way down to Leslie the Peacemaker Smith versus Amanda Lemos. Nelson versus Ponzinibbio, the odds have Nelson at -200, the comeback on Santiago Ponzinibbio at +170. So I saw this fight right away. When the fight was coming up. You know, I never look to the fight card until it's the week of the fight or it's coming up when I have to start doing my film study for it. But I saw it without looking at the odds, and I thought, yeah, Gunnar Nelson, clear as day, is going to get this victory. And I'm just going to ride with my initial thoughts. I've done a little bit of film study, but still, I'm riding with it, man. So Gunnar Nelson and Santiago, they have a very similar reach. Gunnar has at a 1-inch reach disadvantage on the arms and 1 inch at the legs as well. But Santiago throws a lot of looping punches, and he needs to be closer to his opponent to get the job done. In Santiago's last fight against Nordine Taleb, he was struggling to close the distance, and Taleb just basically has the same reach as Gunnar Nelson. But Gunny stands with that karate stance super sideways, and he closes a lot of distance when he goes in for striking combinations. And most people think he's just a grappler. But look what he did to Alan Joban in his last fight. Knocked Joban down with a leaping in strike, a clean right hand that sent basically Joban into the nether realm. He got all wobbly, got Bambi deer leg, looked to be really, really hurt, and then Gunnar finished it with a guillotine choke. And Santiago, he does have decent takedown defense, but I think with Gunnar's leaping in and surprising ability, I feel like he could maybe hurt Ponzinibbio on the feet. That's a little bit of a stretch. But what he does is when he leaps in with those long sideways strikes, that he can then get in on somebody with a body lock. And even if Gunnar were to pull guard, if he can get this fight to the mat, I think it's his. He has a clear path to victory, and I have to go with Gunnar Nelson via his most likely way to win, submission. We talked about it on Twitter. I think you kind of agree.
I do agree. I feel like you pretty much broke it down the way it should be. This is a pretty similar, or not a similar matchup, but I feel like Gunnar Nelson in his fight kind of with Albert Tumenov. I feel like this is going to be Santiago Ponzinibbio is a pretty similar fighter to Albert Tumenov in the fact that he excels quite a bit with his striking abilities, pretty successful on the feet, and doesn't like to take it to the ground, but then again has poor takedown defense. Ponzinibbio has been taken down quite a bit in his UFC career, not too much, but then again he seems to struggle a little bit with those who are wrestlers, but also those who like to grapple. And Gunnar Nelson, once he's able to get you down to the mat, he's very good once he's able to get on top. I do like Gunnar Nelson, though, in this fight. I think that he's going to be able to have I wouldn't say an advantage on the feet, but I like what you said, the way that he kind of utilizes his reach when he's in there. Ponzinibbio is actually going to have, I think, a 1-inch reach advantage, but Gunnar Nelson seems to, in his fights, implement it and use it more effectively, and that's because he kind of, the way he's light on his feet, hops in and out, very light and floaty kind of on the feet, as something you could say. I think Gunnar Nelson's going to be able to maybe get in, sneak in a couple good shots, but then again, Ponzinibbio is a very tough athlete. His only loss, and I think that one of his only losses that he had was his loss against Lorenz Larkin, and I think that was the only time he was finished. I don't think Gunnar Nelson will have the ability to finish him on the feet. I think Ponzinibbio might be the stronger starter, but I do think that as the fight goes on, Gunnar Nelson will have the ability to have the better conditioning and be able to score a finish in this one. So I've been picked by actually a 4th-round submission.
We could look back at his fight with Rick Story, who Rick Story's obviously got some pretty good wrestling, some solid defensive wrestling, and of course he defeated Gunnar Nelson in Stockholm, Sweden, so a place close to where Gunny is from. But since that time, I feel like Gunny has turned into a different fighter. Just look at his body. He was a lot more soft then. And he's against Joban, he came in looking shredded, looking svelte even, you know. And I think the guy that he is today, a lot of people at the top of this division or in the top of the UFC, they're going to have a tough time beating him. And I think he's going to get the victory. If I were a gambling man, I'm not really a gambling man, but I wouldn't feel good laying 2-1 on him. But I definitely think that Gunnar Nelson gets this victory. My only question is he going to smile if he wins? Do you think he smiles if he wins?
I think we'll see a little grin. Maybe not too much of a smile, but definitely something that makes him feel like I'm the man.
Lionel thinks that Gunnar wins by sub in round 3 or 4, and Ryan J thinks that he wins. He clips him on the feet, then it gets him to the ground and submits him, and that's basically what I had. Moving down to the co-main event of the evening, Joanne JoJo Calderwood, man, her voice is fun to listen to, right? Versus Cynthia Calvillo. JoJo is 11-2, and Cynthia Calvillo is 5-0. The odds have Calvillo at minus 225. I'm a little bit surprised at that. And the comeback on JoJo plus 185. Is we going to hear that sweet, sweet voice in the post-fight interview, Wes?
I'd like to, but man, I feel like this is going to be one of the harder fights to call just because we've seen Calvillo have quite a bit of success coming into the UFC. She's now 2-0, having both finishes by submission. And Calderwood, she's been able to get some victories here and there, but then again, they're not really over the greatest competition in the UFC. Valerie Laterna, who's not even in the UFC anymore, who really struggled making this weight and just wasn't really comfortable in the weight class that she was competing in. And then we saw Joanne Calderwood in her last fight get pretty beat up against Jessica Andrade. She was able to just be the superior grappler. Kind of the way I envision this fight, I think Calderwood's best chance of victory is to make it gritty, and I kind of talked to you about that. She's a very technical fighter. She likes to keep it on the feet, pretty scrappy, and she likes to throw a lot of high-paced volume. And I feel like that's something that could affect Calvillo just because Calvillo really hasn't fought or faced a fighter that has the output and the experience that Joanne Calderwood has. But I do think that Calderwood may have the advantage in the grappling department. I think that if Calvillo is able to get this fight down at the ground, she'll have the ability to possibly just be able to control the fight a little bit more. And I kind of like Calvillo in this one. I've been leaning towards her for a decision, and I'm going to keep it that way. I think Calvillo is a pretty decent striker in her own regard. She does have some output, but I don't think it matches Calderwood's. And like I was saying, I think Calvillo's best chance, if she can, is to be able to possibly score a takedown in there, as she has in her past 2 fights, and just try to be able to work her way and control Calderwood on the mat to get a decision.
I didn't think you were going to touch on it, but I'm glad you did. Calvillo does have some pretty good striking, and she is pretty frenetic with her pace. She might not have as high output as Calderwood, but she does surprisingly have a pretty frenetic pace. She comes out with a lot of energy. Her 1-2 is super fast. She mixes in a high kick off that 1-2. And, of course, where she is the best is with her sublime transitioning on the ground. And if she can't get the fight to the ground, if she were to go for a body lock takedown like she would like to do, and she doesn't get it, Calderwood is pretty damn lethal with her knees to the body from that clinch position, with uppercuts to the body. She's very dangerous inside the clinch, and she's also very dangerous at range. And so we mentioned that maybe Calderwood doesn't have that high level victories in the octagon, but neither does Calvillo. I mean, Amanda Bobby Cooper, BFD. Pearl Gonzalez, great. She looks nice, but who gives a F if we're talking about a fist fight here? Still, I am going with Cynthia Calvillo. I think she'll, even if she pulls guard, it doesn't matter. Once she gets the fight to the canvas, I think it is really her fight to win. I mentioned the sublime nature of her transition game. Man, that is so pretty to watch. That weird roll she did to get the back of Amanda Bobby Cooper not too long back, that was something of pure beauty. And I think that she could maybe contend a little bit on the feet with her quick hands, with the frenetic pace that she's putting on. And then if the fight goes to the floor, I think she has a clear path to victory there. But as some of the commenters are saying, man, minus 225 on a girl who's really untested against a lady who has some damn good striking in her own right. And if Calvillo can't get her down, could really chew her up in the clinch, I wouldn't lay minus 225 on Calvillo. But I definitely think Calvillo is going to get the victory. The over-under is at 2.5 rounds. The under is at plus 100 and over is minus 120. I don't know. That's something I thought about looking at, but as of right now, it's not something I'm interested in. Moving on, Stevie Braveheart Ray versus Paul, the Irish Dragon Felder. I used to love to give out the fight-nomics things. You know, a fighter who is 6 years younger than their opponent wins 65% of the time. And we have that here. Stevie Ray is 6 years younger than Paul Felder. Neither guy really has defeated a high level of competition in the UFC. And if we wanted to play MMA math for a second, Stevie Ray defeated Ross Pearson, and Paul Felder lost to Ross Pearson. But those are, I mean, Ross Pearson, everybody knows he fought a lot, and he has fell off steeply in the past few years. So the version of Ross Pearson that fought Stevie Ray was not the same version of Ross Pearson that fought Paul Felder. And we were talking off air, Wes, that ever since Paul Felder knocked out Danny Castillo with a spinning back fist, he kind of turned into this guy who was super in love with the spinning shit. He threw way too many spinning techniques against Ross Pearson and a little bit against Edson Barbosa as well. But I don't think that type of guy is going to show up here. He has fought southpaws like Stevie Ray is in the past. 2 fights ago, he lost to Francisco Trinaldo. It wasn't from standing. Trinaldo was doing a lot of leaping in strikes. Trinaldo also has a really good ground game. He got Paul Felder down and hit him with an elbow that cut his eye open, so it was a doctor stoppage. But the biggest factor here for me, Wes, is I've been back and forth. I'm on the fence for who I think is going to get the victory. And in the end, even though Stevie Ray has a really intelligent lead hand, he throws a lot of variety with his lead right, hook, a shovel uppercut, or a jab. It varies a little bit with the angle with which it is coming. He's very intelligent with that. He's not a finisher. I like finishers. I think Paul Felder is a finisher. But what I'm saying about the X factor in this is Stevie Ray has been training at home for the past couple of camps, and he's got by with it. But he's got by guys that, like I said, at the end of their rope, Joe Lozon and Ross Pearson. And Paul Felder, he's been training at Rufus Sport with guys like, Anthony Showtime Pettis, with high-level guys, been really sharpening his tools. And I think this fight's going to go to a decision. And, Lozon was able to get off on – no, what am I saying? Paul Felder likes to throw the right high kick, and that's really open against southpaws. I think that might score him a lot of points here against Stevie Ray. I am a little bit concerned that it's Stevie Ray's home field advantage, but I'm leaning ever so slightly to Paul the Irish Dragon Felder. What do you think?
One of the reasons that you said that I'm actually kind of leaning more towards Stevie Ray is because, again, you said the hometown advantage. And this fight, kind of stylistically, these two don't really get the quite a bit of finishes over high-level competition who are very successful strikers. Both of these two are pretty good strikers, but they've never really been able to get a lot of finishes. And like I was going to say, they get finishes over fighters that aren't of the highest level competition. That's what I was trying to say. I think that if we're going to see a decision, there's quite a possibility that the hometown field could play a little bit of an advantage in Stevie Ray, and that's because of quite a bit of chance that we could hear, quite a bit of the reactions that we'll hear if Stevie Ray lands punches. I do think that one way Stevie Ray can get this job done is because of Paul Felder's kind of predictability. I feel like Paul Felder, especially in his earlier days in the UFC, he became a pretty predictable fighter, not only with his spinning back fist, but also with just kind of the technique that he throws with his punches. He's kind of shot away from that a little bit, but I do think that Stevie Ray has a little bit more dynamic to his punches. A lot of the losses, and pretty much all the losses that I've seen Stevie Ray have in his mixed martial arts career, have come against grapplers and come against fighters who like to be gritty and grindy along the mat. And Paul Felder has lost to some pretty decent strikers in his career. I do think that this could be a pretty close fight, and I'm not counting Paul Felder out, but I do think that we could see Stevie Ray maybe get that hometown advantage. I'm thinking this is definitely the fight that could be some kind of split decision, but both have the technicality. If they want to and maybe try a little bit hard, could possibly get a finish. But then again, I don't think either's ever been stopped via strikes. You could say Paul Felder has, but then again, it came by a cut. Stevie Ray has never been finished with punches before, and he's fought some pretty devastating strikers before. So I think that I'm going to be favoring a decision in this one, but I'm going to go with Stevie Ray. I like kind of where he is in his career. I'm checking it out now. He's 5-1 in the UFC. Paul Felder's shown a little bit of inconsistency, but I do like Stevie Ray in this one. I think he's starting to develop into a more mature and developed fighter for where he is in his career. He's a little bit younger, too. We talked about this off air. He's only 27. Paul Felder's up at 33. Maybe the youth factor can play a little bit of an advantage in it, but like I said, a close fight overall, but I'm going to be picking Stevie Ray.
And man, it's so tight. This is one of the toughest fights to pick on the entire card for me. I've been mulling over it for a couple of days. I just didn't know how to say who I was picking and why, because it's just so difficult. Yeah, the home field advantage for Stevie Ray. If Stevie were training at a higher level camp he is in, but I watched an interview with our mutual friend James Lynch, and he just said, hey, I'm training at home. So because this is obviously he's from Scotland, this is in Glasgow, Scotland. That's why the referees or the judges would be on his side. But these young guys, 27, he should be improving by leaps and bounds. But that would be if he were training at like a Rufus Sport and stuff like that. I'm very, very on the fence. I'm going to stick. Man, the home field advantage is huge here. I'm going to stick with Paul Felder for now, but I reserve the right to change my pick by fight time. I reserve it. I reserve that right. And Stevie Ray has the more fundamental boxing. He will stick to that game plan, and he could pressure Paul and get Paul to throw mistimed, stupid kicks, I guess. You might be talking me into Stevie Ray already. Oh, man. Great points, Wes. All right, I'm going to pick Stevie Ray. Talk me into it. Stevie Ray over Paul Felder via decision. Yeah, you got me, Wes. All right. Now, I think there's going to be no talking in or out of this next one. Jack the Hammer Marshman, Ryan James. Jack Marshman 21-6, Ryan James 9-2. The odds have Marshman. I believe he is the heaviest favorite on the card. He has -420. The comeback on Ryan James, plus 335. Throwing some misdirection at you. You're picking James, right?
Man, to be honest, I know the odds may not really show it, but I was thinking about James in this one, and I'll kind of tell you a little bit why. Jack Marshman, he is a pretty predominant striker, and that's kind of the only thing he likes to focus on in his fights. And he's been like that, not even just in the UFC, but before he even competed in the promotion. He'd always been looking for knockouts. I'm not sure how many submissions he has on his resume, if any. I'm actually going to try to look while we kind of talk, just to kind of see how Jack Marshman has done, but I don't recall him ever having a submission. It looks like he's got 5, so quite a bit more than I thought, but then again, they come over lower-level competition. But back to kind of the UFC that we've seen in Jack Marshman, his past 2 fights, he lost his last fight, but it pretty much took a spinning hook kick, from Thiago Santos to knock him out. Before that, he had a pretty impressive performance over Magnus Sedenblad, who I think maybe he came in on short notice. I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like he did in that. And the reason I was kind of thinking about James coming into this is because Marshman has always struggled with his takedown defense. He gets taken down pretty much at will. Ryan James, he initiates some takedowns, but he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and has the capabilities of Marshman's trying to get up to the feet. James could possibly hop onto the back and sink in some kind of rear naked choke. But I do like Jack Marshman in this one. I like his striking abilities. I don't think James is experienced enough to face the level of competition Marshman has faced. Marshman's had experience in Alabama and a lot of other promotions and has fought some high-level competition. But he has been stopped a few times, but I don't think Ryan James has the ability to stop him by strikes. For those reasons alone, I'm going to be picking Jack Marshman. I think he's going to be able to stop Ryan James in the second round via strikes.
Ooh, headed all the way to the second round, huh? Wes, do you ever watch James Lynch's interviews with the fighters?
I do, but I haven't catched any with these two.
Well, I watched his with Ryan James and leading up to this fight. And it makes it difficult to cheer against a guy when you watch his interview, when he's such a down-to-earth guy. He seems like he'd be a cool guy to hang out with and stuff. So I regret saying that Jack Marshman's going to knock him out in the first round. I do think that it is a liability for Marshman to not have very good takedown defense. In his UFC career, it's only 20%. I don't know how many takedowns he has defended. And James has 100% takedown accuracy. But Marshman has really good movement. He's got solid, crisp boxing. He hits pretty damn hard. And Ryan James kind of walks forward real stiff. His neck, like at the bottom of his head is welded to his shoulder blades, just real stiff in there. He's going to come forward. He might look to tie up, and he doesn't have very good defense whatsoever. I think an overhand or a hook from Marshman is going to send Ryan James careening to the canvas. And Marshman better be careful in there because he could get submitted in the guard. But, yeah, man, I don't think that James has very good striking defense. I don't know if he has a proper chin to deal with the pressure and the power of Jack Marshman. And I think Marshman hammers him. First round KO or TKO for the hammer. I was going to be punny, but it was just lame. Khalil Rountree Jr. versus Paul Bearju Craig. So a couple of things I'm going to say straight. Wait, I forget the odds. Okay, sorry. The odds have Khalil at minus 220, the comeback on Craig plus 180. I want to say the reason that I'm picking Khalil Rountree is for a couple of things. Paul Craig, in his last fight against Tyson Pedro, he went for a couple of head and arm throws, a technique that we often see in women's bantamweight, strawweight, probably soon to happen in women's flyweight. You should not do that to a 205-pound man. You try to head and arm throw them. That is some low-level takedown BS, Paul Craig. What the hell were you thinking? And Tyson Pedro is a high-level jiu-jitsu guy. What are you thinking, bro? Right? No, don't do it. I'm mad at him for that. I picked him in that fight, and then he did that. So that's one reason I can never pick Paul Craig again. Now, Khalil Rountree, of course, he has terrible takedown defense, or he has had struggled with that in the past. I mean, there's also been struggled with letting guys just control him on the ground for a super long time. Forgot to mention, Paul Craig, he does have super slick submission ability. He submitted Frankenstein, Henrique da Silva off of his back after pulling guard, so that's something we could pay attention to here. But Khalil Rountree, in his last fight with, I forget his name, I got to look it up, Daniel Jolly. So Jolly came in looking for a takedown immediately. Khalil pushed first he had a huge sprawl, great sprawl, props for that. Pushed his head down and then brought his knee to his face and knocked him out. That was impressive. But the biggest thing is after the fight, Khalil said he's done thinking of this as a sport. He's done pretending like he's doing a collegiate sport, basically. He's out there. Now he's going to be focused on this person's trying to hurt me, and instead of them hurting me, I'm going to fucking hurt them first, and I'm going to knock them out. And I love that mentality. I love that we saw that switch happen for him. So I think Khalil Rountree knocks out Paul Craig probably in the very first round. What do you think?
I kind of like what you were saying about Rountree. I feel like after his last fight, he was kind of able to realize who he is and what he wants to accomplish in mixed martial arts, and I'm a big fan of that. I don't want to shy away too much from Paul Craig. I like the dude. He's got a funny personality. I think he's a math teacher during the day and then a mixed martial artist at night, which I think is pretty cool. But I don't think Paul Craig is really the most experienced in mixed martial arts. He was able to get a victory in his UFC debut over Henrique da Silva, but did suffer a loss in a pretty not-so-good loss in his last fight to Tyson Pedro, who then again, Tyson Pedro is definitely going to be a star in the light heavyweight division someday. But Paul Craig, I don't really know if he's really the most technical fighter in the world. As you were saying, he was doing a lot of weird things in his last fight. I know he's pretty credentialed in his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills, and he definitely has abilities to get a submission in this fight, and that's based off Khalil Rountree's poor takedown defense, as you mentioned. But I do think Khalil Rountree is a little bit better of a mixed martial artist at this point in their careers. I think he's got the ability with the striking. Let's say he didn't even focus on the striking at all. I don't think he needs to worry about that too much because he is a very good striker. Paul Craig doesn't really throw a lot of strikes in his fights. That's not really his main purpose. He likes to try to get the fights down to the ground. Khalil Rountree, he's already great at striking. I think his biggest hole is his grappling and his defensive wrestling abilities. And I feel like if he's worked on that, kind of as we saw from when he talked in his last fight over his victory against Daniel Jolly, I think that Khalil Rountree has the abilities to get a victory in this one. And for that reason, I'm favoring a knockout too. I've got Khalil Rountree picked by first-round knockout. Paul Craig was stopped by strikes in his last one pretty viciously. I think Khalil Rountree is a little more powerful than Tyson Pedro, despite having already lost to him, but maybe more so with the strikes. So I do like Khalil Rountree in this one. I think he gets back in the win column.
Something to take into consideration is that Paul Craig, I don't know if he was training with them before, but for this camp, he was with the All-Stars gym. So guys like Alexandre the Mauler Gustafsson. So perhaps that could really, really benefit him here. I didn't look at it. I forgot to do it. I don't know who Khalil is training with for this fight. I don't. Off the top of my head, do you know where he trains?
I have honestly no clue, but I'm going to try to find while we're talking, but I'm not too sure.
Syndicate MMA? Well, anyway, so unanimous. We're picking Khalil Rountree to get an early stoppage victory over Paul Craig. Now, the first fight of the official main card portion, a couple of debutantes. James Juggernaut Mulheron versus Justin Big Pretty Willis. James Mulheron making his UFC debut at 11-1. Justin Willis is 4-1. The odds have Willis as a healthy favorite, -220, with the comeback on Mulheron at +170. Who do you think wins in their UFC debut?
To be honest, between these two, I have no clue. I don't really understand why Justin Willis is the favorite in this one, and maybe it's just because I don't know enough about him. I guess he trains out of AKA, so maybe that's a little bit of something to do with it. But he's got far less fights. I know he was supposed to make his UFC debut back at UFC 208 against Marshman Tybura. But besides that, he's only got 4 victories, 4 in a row. James Mulheron has only 1 loss on his record, but a far more amount of wins and over fighters who I'm actually aware of. I don't really know too much about what Justin Willis has accomplished, but I did watch a little bit of tape on both of these two. James Mulheron likes to kind of sit back, backpedal a little, likes to grapple here and there. Doesn't really have the most striking output, while Justin Willis is a pretty powerful striker. Loves to throw heavy bombs, but just doesn't really have the most technicality to his punches. I am really on the fence here in picking a fighter or any fighter, either one of these two, just because I don't know much about either one. But I'm checking out on Pick'em. I had Mulheron because I thought maybe his experience would be a little bit more of an advantage. Maybe be able to grapple his way, score some takedowns in there, maybe get some kind of submission, since Justin Willis really hasn't fought too many submission fighters in his career. But, man, Willis got some powerful hands, and I'm going to change my pick because I don't really know much about either. I'm going to pick Justin Willis. From what I was watching, he seems to be a powerful striker. I think he's fighting out of the better gym. I think he's going to have the better training partners coming into this fight. But then again, Mulheron is ranked first of 103 active UK/Ireland pro heavyweights. So maybe I don't know too much about him, and maybe I'm kind of overlooking him, or maybe I did have the right idea, and maybe I just lost a pick because of that. But I'm going to stick with Justin Willis now. I was impressed with watching some tape, but pretty much solely off his power and not too much his technicality. But could be one of those slobber knockers, just because they both seem to like to throw down here and there, and they're also heavyweights. But I'm going to stick now with Justin Willis after changing my pick literally seconds ago.
Wes, did you know that Willis was pulled from UFC 208 because he was having trouble with his weight cut?
Really? I knew he was pulled, but I didn't know it was for weight cut.
And you know what weight class we're talking about, right?
Oh, that's pretty disappointing.
That's not good, right? A heavyweight was struggling to cut to 265. It's almost embarrassing. I don't know. I mean, it's crazy. But both of these guys are rather short and really round. Mulheron, he looks to be the flabbier of the two fighters. Mulheron has the quicker hands. He's got really fast hands for a guy that is as pudgy as he is. It really, really does. But the reason Justin Willis is such a large favorite is because he's going to be coming out there. Well, you mentioned it. He trains with AKA, so he trains with guys like Daniel Cormier, Cain Velasquez if he can, stuff like that. And he's a wrestler. That's why that's one of the main reasons he's a huge favorite here. But one thing to note is Willis hasn't fought since June of 2016, so that could be an X factor here. But Willis, he'll come out, he'll throw big bungalows and wild looping strikes, and then he'll get the fight to the ground, and then he will ground and pound his opponent right into oblivion. When he fought, I think it was in Japan, he came out right away and did that, and his opponent like fell out of the cage or out of the ring, and they pulled him back in. And so you're saying Wesley just messaged me that Mulheron's going to have the hometown advantage. I think Scotland, or I think his hometown, is going to cry when Justin Willis ground and pounds him into pixie dust in about a minute and a half. But since these guys are chubby and almost as wide as they are tall, if it goes past 5 minutes, we're in for a real goofy fight. What do you think about any of that?
I was going to respond. I think you're right on that one, and I think it's because, well, I looked at some of Mulheron's tape, and he's pretty similar. He's a guy that likes to kind of grind here and there, but does have some powerful hands. And I think you're right. Now that you're telling me a little bit about what Justin Willis does, I didn't really know too much about him coming in. I think that this could be a slower paced fight, and maybe we see a knockout happen. Maybe not so much because of the power, even though these are heavyweights, but maybe more so because of the fatigue.
Oh, God, I hope that's not it. But I really think that Willis is going to come in. He's going to swing wildly, get in on Mulheron's hips, get him to the ground, and grind his face into pixie dust, TKO from ground and pound in about a minute and a half. And if that doesn't happen, then we could see some sluggish type of shit. But moving down the card to Danny Hot Chocolate Roberts versus Bobby Nasty Nash. Roberts 13-2. Nasty Nash is 8-2. The odds have Hot Chocolate at -210. The comeback on Nasty Nash at +175. I gotta look at some of my notes here. So Roberts, he has a background in boxing. He started boxing as a teenager. He uses good footwork and movement, fundamentally sound head movement. But against Mike Perry, he really struggled with the forward pressure of Perry. So that's something that we could look to maybe fade Hot Chocolate in this matchup a little bit. But even though he's primarily just pure boxing, he's developed his kickboxing as well as being a well-rounded mixed martial artist. He submitted Nathan Coy off of his back with an Anderson Silva-style triangle choke. On the other side, Nasty Nash, he has a background in wrestling, but he swings rather wildly. He's a wrestle kickboxer that Hot Chocolate is really used to. He throws a lot of long, powerful strikes with a near pure disregard for striking defense, which I think that's really what's going to hurt him in this matchup. And even though he has the wrestling credentials at Michigan State, he's never tried in his entire mixed martial arts career that I've seen to try to Rochalt people. He's in there to swang and bang, as the Black Beast would say. And I think that could hurt him. And what's really going to hurt him is this is the first fight outside of the U.S. for Nash, and Roberts is fighting close to home. This could be a tough trek for Bobby Nash, and I think his lack of striking defense will basically hurt him badly in this fight. I don't know if he has enough pure power and forward pressure, fundamentally sound defense to scare Roberts off, and I think that Roberts is going to outstrike him, perhaps to a decision, perhaps a TKO, but however long it lasts, I think that it's going to be exciting, and Roberts is going to win.
Yeah, I saw Danny Roberts when he fought his last fight against Mike Perry. He had some moments in there. He was able to hang in, land some pretty decent counters in that fight. But then he got knocked out really bad in that third round. I mean, I honestly felt bad for the guy because he pretty much looked dead when he was laying down on the canvas. It was absolutely brutal. But he doesn't really have the best takedown defense, and you kind of talked about it. Danny Roberts has always been pretty reliant off his striking abilities. But then again, he was able to submit Nathan Corey, who's a fantastic wrestler, but also had some experience, I think, with jiu-jitsu. So that was definitely an impressive victory that Danny Roberts had coming in. I think he may have taken that fight on short notice, or maybe it was the other way around, but still a very impressive performance over a guy of the caliber of Nathan Coy in his UFC debut. But I've actually been a little bit on the fence on this one. I know that Danny Roberts is going to be probably having, again, the hometown advantage in this one. But I know that when Danny Roberts fought Dominique Steele was able to score quite a bit of takedowns, and he just really wasn't effective with his striking. He didn't really show a lot of power or ability to try to dominate in the striking department with Danny Roberts. Just kind of was trying to look for the takedowns, kind of hold him there and keep him there. I think Bobby Nash, you mentioned it yourself, he's a pretty active fighter. He likes to throw pretty big, heavy bombs, looping punches. So maybe his technicality really isn't the best on the feet, but if he kind of relies off his experience and his wrestling abilities, I think that he'll have the ability to get this fight down to the ground, because I do think Bobby Nash is a little more credentialed in the wrestling department than that of Dominique Steele. and possibly squeeze out a decision victory utilizing some ground and pound because, like I said, and you said yourself, he is pretty active with his punches and likes to look for the finishes. So if Bobby Nash comes out there and fights with a good game plan and utilizes that wrestling, I think he's going to be able to get the job done. And for that reason, I picked Bobby Nash. But if he doesn't look for those takedowns, I definitely would favor Danny Roberts and probably by some kind of late stoppage or a decision victory.
So, Wes, we've talked about it a few times. You're not a gambling man, but you've considered doing some play gambling or something like that. If you were to give out a betting tip at the odds of plus 175, you thinking that Bobby Nash is somebody that you could not only bet on perhaps or put on your DraftKings team?
I think it would definitely be a possibility. Maybe not so much on the DraftKings team just because I don't know if – well, I take that back because Bobby Nash does have quite a bit of knockouts. Danny Roberts was stopped pretty bad in his last fight. So was Bobby Nash. So the unpredictability there is definitely possible. I feel just because they're both coming off pretty bad knockout losses. With Bobby Nash being the underdog in this one just slightly, you could definitely take a risk on it. But then again, you have to think of a few things. First off, the fact that Danny Roberts is going to have the hometown field advantage. And secondly, that Bobby Nash really hasn't utilized too much of his wrestling as he could and as he should, just based off his previous career. So kind of the unknown. I feel like if you enter an unknown in the gambling by picking Bobby Nash, it's a little bit risky just because Bobby Nash we haven't seen him look for wrestling or look for takedowns too often. And if he doesn't, I don't think he's going to have a chance to win unless he connects with a big bomb on Danny Roberts. So maybe take a risk on it, but I'd say be maybe a little bit more I try to look for somebody I'm a little bit more confident in trusting their skill set.
I decided to look it up quick on DraftKings, and Bobby Nash is the cheapest fighter on DraftKings. And if you were to utilize the wrestling, I think that takedowns are worth a lot of points on DraftKings. So if you really think he's going to get the job done, I think he's a must-have on your DraftKings team. I mean, that's big there, right? I'm no DraftKings expert, but that seems – I mean, if you're picking him, he definitely could get some takedowns. It's not like Danny Roberts has great takedown defense, or at least percentage-wise, and if he were to go to that, maybe he could do it. I'm definitely picking Danny Hot Chocolate Roberts. I think his striking is better. I think he gets it done there. We're going to see an exciting fight, but just looking at the DraftKings, the cheapest fighter on DraftKings, that might be something to take a look at. But let's move on. Alexandre, the Cannibal Pantoja, I think it's Pantoja, versus Neil Two-Tap Seery. The odds have Pantoja at minus 330 to come back on Neil Seery, plus 270. I think this is probably Neil Seery's swan song. Do you think he rides off into the sunset on a victory?
Has he talked about it being a swan song? Has he confirmed it?
Well, he said that he was supposed to fight Ian McCall. Let me just check something. He was supposed to fight Ian McCall back in November, and of course that was one of the times that Ian McCall pulled out. I don't know which reason it was this time, but I think it was in Ireland. Was that fight in Ireland in November? But anyway, he said that was his last fight for sure. And then Ian McCall pulled out on weigh-in day, I think it was. So I'm assuming, I don't know, he hasn't done an interview in preparation for this fight, but he said that one was his last one. I don't know why this one wouldn't be.
Yeah, you're probably right. I just know he talked about it quite a bit more. This one he's been a little bit more quiet about. And I'm not really too sure why, but then again, Neil Seery, he's definitely up there in age. He's 37 years old. But the biggest thing, and one of the things I like about Neil Seery, is that he's a very durable fighter and loves to scrap. He's a predominant boxer, loves to go in there. He's pretty technical with his striking abilities, and he's willing to take quite a bit of risks, and I like that. But he's definitely up there in age, like I mentioned, and Seery has not fought, I guess, in quite a while, and I think his last loss came to Kyoji Horiguchi, but I'm not really sure when. But Seery definitely was able to land some decent shots in there, but most of the time Horiguchi was able to control the pace of the fight. One thing that I've noticed with watching Pantoja's footage is that he controls the pace in a way where he likes to get gritty, and he loves to go up, try to clinch, and try to take you down on the mat. He's not really the most active puncher when it gets in those clinch positions because he's a pretty credentialed jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu athlete. And Pantoja, he is pretty good on the feet. His striking has definitely evolved. He hasn't lost in quite a bit. His actual last loss came to Jussier Formiga in 2010, so it's been a while since we've seen Pantoja on the losing end. In a professional fight, he did lose on the Tough 24 Champion Series to I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but the guy that
Hiramosa Okikubu or Ojikubo.
Okukubu, I like that. He lost a decision in that one, but I do think that in this fight, Pantoja is going to have the grappling abilities. Neil Seery has never really shown the best takedown defense. Has been pretty inconsistent in some of his recent performances. I do like Pantoja's consistency in trying to be able to get the fight down to the ground and trying to take the back. But like I mentioned, Pantoja is not really that active, so maybe Seery can capitalize on that. But I do think that Pantoja is going to have the superior advantage when we see clinch battles. And if Pantoja can get the fight down to the ground, I don't think Neil Seery is going to be able to get up to the feet, as Neil Seery's losses have come against those who like to grapple and wrestle. So I'm going to be favoring Pantoja on this one. I haven't picked by decision, but then again, that's another risk because he is not going to have the hometown advantage behind him.
I don't think that we'll need to worry about home field advantage here for Neil Seery. You mentioned he's super durable, and he's not opposed to going for a takedown himself. And Pantoja, it's either Pantoja or Pantoja. I'm pretty sure it's Pantoja, right? Because it's Brazilian.
I think it's Pantoja.
Okay. So he gets a little wild sometimes. He's not opposed to being put on his back, and Seery's not opposed to going for takedowns, even though he's mostly a boxer. He does mix in some low kicks and stuff, so perhaps Seery could do that. But I really, that would not be a good idea for him, and I really doubt he does it. I'm just throwing it out there that Pantoja doesn't have very good takedown defense, or he just puts himself in bad predicaments, and Seery's not opposed to the takedowns. Don't think it happens, though, because even if Seery were to put himself on the canvas with Pantoja, not a really good idea. Pantoja, he seems like he's a mostly submission guy, but he's really well-rounded. 6 of his victories via submission, 6 by KO, and 5 by decision. So he's pretty well-rounded, and it's surprising that Seery's level of victories are pretty darn similar. But Pantoja teaches Muay Thai. He's also a state champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's tenured. You mentioned Seery's 37 in the flyweight division. 37 in the flyweight division.
He's
yeah,
got to be the oldest.
What's that?
He's got to be the oldest flyweight, right?
Yeah, dude. I mean, maybe if he were a heavyweight, he'd be peaking, but in the lowest weight class in the UFC, that's not great, dude. And he sat out for a while. He has some ring rust. He is fighting close to home. He could have some extra motivation because it's his swan song or whatever. But, man, I think Pantoja's strikes are – they are harder. They might not be as fast as Seery's, and Seery does hit hard as well, but Pantoja hits super hard. I think he's more dynamic with his entire striking game, not just hands. And then I think he has a clear victory on the ground. I think he takes Seery to the ground, looks for submissions, but never gets it. And I agree. We're going to see a decision, but I think it'll be so clear that we're not going to need the judges. Fingers crossed, though, right? Because MMA judging is kind of a crapshoot. Charlie Relentless Ward versus Galore Bofando. The odds have Bofando at -220, the comeback on Charlie Ward at +180. Bofando hasn't fought in 2 years. And really, some of the tape I was able to find on him, it was like a kickboxing contest, but in a cage and wearing MMA gloves. Super weird. I don't know what was going on. So they'd clinch, and the referee would separate them. Somebody would fall down, and he would bring them back to their feet. Super weird stuff. But we saw Charlie Ward in his last fight get knocked out by somebody who's a less striking caliber than Bofando, and very similar physically, very similar in their athleticism and their explosivity. But Bofando is thunderous with his strikes, and even though he is 4-2, those 2 losses are disqualifications for kneeing a downed opponent. So really, he doesn't have any losses. I know it's technically a loss, but did he lose? Did he really lose? No. It's the same way that Johnny Boney Joni lost to Hamill, the Hammer. So, fuck. I just think that Charlie Ward, he's going to move forward. He's going to press forward, and I wonder if he could get a takedown and grind out Bofando. And I'm interested if Bofando has any takedown defense, if he has any cardio sitting out for 2 years. But really, I think that Charlie Ward has terrible striking defense. He's not that durable. He's in the UFC because he trains at Straight Blast Gym or whatever, Straight Blast, SBG, whatever. I think Bofando puts a shin on his face early on in this fight and gets a first-round KO or TKO.
Did you pick Bofando?
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell everybody that's watching this, and you as well. I don't know if you know or had a chance to watch any of Galore Bofando's tape from when he was competing pretty active, but I honestly love this dude. This dude is one of the most pretty entertaining prospects who doesn't have more than 5 wins that I've had a chance to watch. He is a pretty unorthodox fighter. Fights, especially for his weight, you wouldn't think that for a welterweight that he can move as well as he does. He looks like he's a lot bigger than he actually is, but Bofando is a very, very impressive athlete. He seems to be very conditioned well. I kind of like the way he moves. As I was saying, he's unorthodox. He throws quite a variety of strikes and spinning techniques, and he loves to throw spinning hook kicks and also utilize kicks effectively to keep his opponent back. Kind of a way that we saw, I'm trying to remember the fight, but kind of like Jacare close did when we saw him fight Mark Giacchesi in his last fight. Very similar to that, except more unorthodox and a little bit more unpredictable. His only 2 losses did come by disqualification, but all of his other victories have come, I think, by finish. Then again, Charlie Ward, it's honestly hard to find tape on him, and the only tape that I was really able to find of him, and I didn't want to talk about it, but was over Joao Carvalho, the fighter that died due to brain trauma, and that was his only victory that I was able to really find somewhat of decent film on. Besides that, he just hasn't really had the experience in facing high-level competition, and his technique really isn't there in comparison to Bofando, despite having training partners with Gunnar Nelson, who's in the main event, and Conor McGregor. So I'm going to be leaning Bofando in this one. I really like his abilities. I think that this guy's going to surprise a lot of people when he fights on Saturday or Sunday, whichever day this card is. But I do think Bofando's going to get it done, and I haven't picked by first-round knockout.
Yeah, man. His background is in a Japanese style of kickboxing, Bofando. And yeah, he's super fun to watch. And Wes, I couldn't find much film on Charlie Ward either, other than his loss in the UFC. But I refuse to watch the fight where that Carvalho, is that right?
I don't know. Yeah, Carvalho.
I refused to watch it. I didn't want to. So I didn't even watch that film on him. But what I saw in the UFC was enough for me to pick Bofando. But again, I question Bofando coming off this 2-year layoff. I saw an interview with Bofando that he was, for some reason, he wasn't shocked he got the call. He's like, you know what? It's how the universe set things together. I got the call. I'm going to go and do my thing. So, okay, sure. Yeah. The guy's incredibly exciting. Hate to cheer for somebody, but I hope Bofando gets the victory, because if he does, it's going to be a highlight. It's going to be performance bonus type of shit. Danny the Hatchet Henry versus Daniel Kid Dynamite Teymur. Evidently, Daniel Teymur's nickname is after Mike Tyson, so that's a fun fact. The odds have Teymur at -220, the comeback on Danny Henry at +180. Fun fact again, Daniel Teymur's older brother, David Teymur, just beat Lando Groovy Venata. Do you think that the guy that defeated Groovy, his younger brother, will have a successful UFC debut?
I think he's got a good shot, but then again, I can't find really that much about any of the opponents that he's fought. Danny Hendren himself, he's pretty much the same way, but has quite a bit of finishes. Daniel Teymur, I'm going to maybe call him David at some point, but Daniel Teymur has all finishes in the first round. But then again, he should actually be what I believe. He is 6-0. He should be 5-1. I found a tape of him in one of his fights, and you might have saw it. He fought a guy named Emmerich Yombi, and this was back in 2015, so it was a while ago. But Emmerich Yombi at the time, I don't think had any mixed martial arts fights, and I'm taking a look. He actually had quite. Let's see. He was 2-0 coming into the fight, but he was fighting Daniel Teymur, and in the fight, he ended up pretty much just a shortened version. You can go and watch it on YouTube, but he knocks out, maybe a little controversial, but he definitely stops Daniel Teymur via strikes, and the referee waves it off. But then Daniel protests, and the referee says, "You know what? I made a mistake. Let's let it keep going," which you can't do. And for some reason, they let this fight continue, and Daniel was able to come back and get the victory, despite pretty much already losing. So the guy that he lost but was able to win a fight, even though he had lost literally 2 minutes before that. But then again, he was able to come back and win, so I can't complain. He's undefeated. I'm actually kind of thinking about picking Danny Henry in this one. I liked some of the tape that I was able to watch on him. I thought he was a pretty impressive and dynamic fighter. I felt like he had a lot of different ways to get the victory. I thought he was a little bit quicker after watching some of the tape footage. David Teymur is pretty quick. Daniel Teymur, in comparison to his brother, is a lot slower. Is able to get some submission victories, but doesn't really have a lot of power and speed off of his punches, while I was able to notice that Daniel Henry has that just advantage a little bit more, and also I think has the ability to grapple and take this one to the ground if need be. So I'm actually going to be picking Danny Henry in this one. I don't know too much about either, but then again, I was impressed with watching some tape footage, and I get 40 extra bonus points on UFC Pick'em if I get them right, and not a lot of people are picking them. So I'm going to lean Danny Henry in this one, but it's definitely a risk.
There's not a whole lot for me to say, Wes. You covered everything that I had planned to say. Yeah, that was a bullshit where he lost by TKO and then comes back. It wasn't just him that was protesting. It was his corner, like his brother and stuff. They stormed the octagon, or they stormed the cage, and I don't know, maybe they threatened the referee, and the referee's like, you know what, let's do it. Let's just do it again. And then he ended up sinking in a submission via guillotine choke or something, if I'm recalling right. So that's kind of bullshit. And on top of that, at least 2 of Daniel Teymur's TKO stoppage victories were super early stoppages. It was like maybe he landed a high kick and it knocked his opponent down, and as soon as the opponent hit the canvas from him knocking them down, the referee waved it off. So I'm not saying he wouldn't have won, but it's like, and I don't know what promotion it was for, so maybe they stop it early. I know they stop fights early in amateur because they don't want anybody to get hurt, but this is professional, and the person protested immediately, and that person didn't have their corner able to talk the referee into restarting it. So that's something that I was questioning as well. And Henry, he throws a myriad of long, dynamic striking combinations. He's at long straight punches, long kicks, and he also uses his length to find good angles on submissions. He's almost 6 foot tall, and he ordinarily fights at 145 pounds, though. That could hurt him here. Teymur's normally a lightweight, but Teymur, we don't have his height on UFC.com, but he's a rather short guy. When I was doing the film, I went in ordinarily, and I thought, I'm going to pick Teymur because he's David Teymur's younger brother. But yeah, man, I wasn't that impressed with him. He doesn't have very good striking defense. He is rather dynamic, and he was training Muay Thai before he got into mixed martial arts. I don't know about his ground game. I was going to favor Daniel Teymur, but I'm kind of annoyed by what I mentioned about the early stoppages for him in victory and the weird stoppage for him to get it restarted. I mean, obviously his corner just wanted him to get a springboard to the UFC and stuff, but I'm going to pick Daniel Teymur via decision. Oh, speaking, Danny Henry has a home field advantage, man. You might talk me into it again, Wes. I hope I don't regret it.
Do you remember that?
No, just say it.
If you go back and watch, it made me think of David David Teymur, Daniel Teymur's brother, when he was on the season of Tough, where he was on Team Connor and going up against Uriah Faber. It was a really you'll have to go watch it yourself, but David has a pretty open personality. Let's just say it that way.
What did he say exactly?
He pretty much told old Cody Garbrandt that he was gonna pretty much. He first said, "I'm gonna like, you better hold your underwear, man." Like, and then I'm going after it, buddy. You're done. I don't know.
You told me he told Cody Garbrandt he's gonna fuck him.
He said it word for word, dude. He said it word for word. You can go find the tape. He's like, "I'm gonna fuck you." It's hilarious.
David said that?
Oh, yeah, David Teymur said it on Tough.
Oh, that is some weird shit. Okay, I don't know. Teymur trains with the better camp, that is for certain. I can't tell which fighter is really better based on their level of competition. I don't know much about Danny Henry's opposition. And Daniel Teymur, I think he fought one guy twice. Is that Kibasa?
I believe you're right.
Nope, that was somebody else on the card. Well, it's just the early stoppages and them refighting his fights. I don't really know. He too has fought at 148 pounds, so it's not like he's a huge lightweight. I guess I'm going to go with you. We're going to pick Danny Henry. He gets the hometown nod, and with his long, lengthy strikes can get past the kind of suspect guard of Daniel Teymur. So I'll pick the hometown hero, Danny the Hatchet Henry. So I guess we're going with that. Here's a fight that I'm pretty confident in, and I've got a little bit to say about. It's the main event of the UFC Fight Pass prelims. Brett the Pikey Johns versus Albert the Warrior Morales. So I watched an interview with Brett Johns and our friend James Lynch. And I also watched an interview with Albert Morales, the Warrior, with James Lynch. And it was interesting to hear their respective mindsets because, like, Albert Morales was talking about he's been reading books and trying to get mentally strong, trying to become the best mixed martial artist in the world. He said he wants to be legendary or something like that, so he's really trying hard. Then the opposite side, Brett Johns is like, bro, I've been in training camp for basically 6 months. I want this fight to be done and over with because it was at, how long ago was it? He was scheduled to fight Ian Entwistle at UFC 209, was it? He was, back in March. Anyway, in March, he was scheduled to fight Ian Entwistle. And of course, Ian Entwistle was hospitalized because he couldn't make the weight. But then Brett basically went right back into fight camp to fight on this card. So he's been in a training camp for 6 months. So that could really wear on him. A person that is mentally spent on the fight, that could really hurt him here. But for the odds, we have Brett Johns is the favorite at -400 and Albert Morales is +325. Initially watching film, I thought it would be closer to that. But Morales, he's shown some decent takedown defense against lower opposition than Brett Johns. And Brett Johns, obviously, he's kind of a wrestle boxer, but he's really dynamic as well. He will threaten with the level changes because he's good with his wrestling. Then he'll come upstairs with a flying knee. Not as cool as Yoel versus Chris Weidman, but, you know, he has that ability. We've only seen him fight once in the octagon against Kwan Ho Kwak. And honestly, I'm doing a bit of MMA math, Wes, but Kwan Ho Kwak, I think, is better than Albert Morales, even though Morales has been given to a higher level of competition, obviously with Tominhas Almeida. But what I think this fight comes down to is the takedown ability of Brett Johns, the takedown defense of Albert Morales, and then, again, on the interview with James Lynch, Morales was touching on in his last fight against Andre Sukumta how he faded in the third round, but he's brought in a new strength and conditioning coach. He's been training really, really hard. You can't take that into consideration when they say, oh, you know, I really, really want it. But he has added strength and conditioning, and he never had a strength and conditioning coach before that. He was just focused on boxing mostly. But I think his lack of takedown defense against this level or this caliber of wrestler is going to hurt him. And then again against Andre Sukumta. Yeah, I think that's how you say it. Anyway, Sukumta was ripping a left hook to Morales' liver, and he did it over and over and over again. The same punch, didn't hide it, wasn't masking it, just ripping that fucking thing, ripping it. And Morales never defended it. Just let it happen. What are you doing, man? If you would have started defending that, then of course Sukumtal would come upstairs, but I just thought he should have made adjustments. He probably literally hit him with 12 of them. But anyway, back to John's. He likes to throw combinations where he will, in this combination, he'll rip to the body. He'll throw that same hook to the body, but he'll throw like a 1-2 hook to the body, inside leg kick, takedown. And where he's throwing a shitload of those same hooks to the body, but he's not just throwing it naked like Sukumtal did. I feel like that's a clear path to victory, is hurt Morales' body if he's not going to defend it, and if he's going to stand super tall, he's not going to be able to defend the takedowns. He's not going to be able to defend the left rip to the body. And I think that this really is Brett John's fight to lose. I'm not certain that he gets a finish, but I am going to pick him via KO or TKO in round number 3, an accumulation of ground and pound and left hooks to the body.
I like your round 3 pick, but I actually didn't really think of that too much. And I am leaning Brett Johns, but the reason I'm picking a decision and not necessarily a finish was because one of the things that I noticed between watching some of the footage on Albert Morales and then comparing it to Brett Johns, I actually noticed that Brett Johns seemed to fade a little bit more in the 3rd round than that of Albert Morales did in some of the 3rd rounds of his fights. I felt like that Brett Johns sometimes puts a lot of emphasis in trying to get those takedowns, which he's fantastic at doing, knowing his wrestling credentials, but it seems like he wasn't really prepared for the striking ability of Kwan Ho Kwak there in the 3rd round. He was able to kind of take advantage in the moments that Brett Johns wasn't able to control him on the mat, and Kwak was able to stand up and land some decent strikes. So what I think we're going to see happen is Brett Johns go out there relentless, pretty much kind of like you talked about, be able to go out there and score fast takedowns in the beginning, repetitive over and over. I don't think Albert Morales really has the experience yet to be able to stuff those takedowns. But then again, he's never faced a caliber wrestler like that of Brett Johns, the pikey. I do think that we're going to see Brett Johns, like I said, have a very fast start. Definitely take those first 2 rounds, but actually not really what I was thinking or what you were thinking, but I was thinking that in that 3rd round we may see Morales be able to take over just a little bit if Brett Johns puts a lot of emphasis and maybe a little bit too much emphasis trying to score competitive, or it's not competitive, but repetitive takedowns. And I was thinking maybe Morales takes that last round, but then again, Brett Johns takes the decision of 29-28. But I do like what you were saying. Maybe Brett Johns has worked on his cardio as well, and if he has, Morales has never really shown it that great as well. Brett Johns is still undefeated. That kind of carries with him, along with probably, again, having the hometown advantage, releasing people there to cheer him on. I do think Brett Johns is the better athlete in this one, and I think he's got the better chance and path for a victory. So I'm going to be going Brett Johns. I haven't picked by decision, not a finish, but I'm going to go a 29-28 unanimous in his favor.
Yeah, that might be more likely, man, that he gets a decision. He said he's prepared for war. They always say that. He doesn't think the fight will go to a decision. It's probably the most likely outcome is via decision. I forgot about my own X factor. If it was to go to a decision, is perhaps Brett Johns could fade quickly because he's just kind of tired of, 6-month camp, as I mentioned. Maybe that's something. But I also forgot to mention, I think that Morales, his striking, even though he trains primarily boxing, I think his primary home gym is with boxing gym. He basically just throws shitloads of left hooks, low kicks. Left hook, low kick, right straight occasionally, but fuckloads of left hooks. And I think that will be like Kwan Ho Kwak was very dynamic, throwing all kinds of shit at Brett Johns, and Brett was easily avoided it and was easily dealing with that. And where it's just the left hook that Brett Johns has to worry about, I think this will be easier for him. I think that, and also about the cardio thing and ripping to the body and maybe slowing down Morales. Morales is taking the fight on short notice. It was announced on just June 27th, so not that long ago, that he was replacing Mitch Gagnon. And I think this is an easier fight for the pikey than Gagnon would have been. And I really think this is definitely Brett Johns' fight to win. And you agree with me. But first fight of the night, Leslie the Peacemaker Smith, who was 9-7 with 1 draw against Amanda Lemos from Brazil, 6-0 with one draw. The odds have Leslie Smith -170. The comeback on Lemos at +150. Who do you think wins the first fight of the night?
I think it's got to be Leslie Smith, and I don't want to talk about this too much just because I feel like it's not really a fight that needs to be discussed that much. But then again, Leslie Smith is a very durable and game athlete, and that's one thing I love about watching her fight. She always goes in there and just wants to scrap, and I really respect that. Leslie Smith, she has suffered quite a bit of losses in her career. She's shown quite inconsistency, especially back in the Invicta days, but also the fact she's actually alternated victories since beating Jessamine Duke, and before that losing to Sarah Kaufman. So she's been winning, losing, winning, losing. And if it kind of goes to what we I guess based off that, that means Amanda Lemos should win. But I don't think Amanda Lemos has been able to fight the best competition. She hasn't. She is undefeated, but her past two victories both came over the same person. Before that, it was two fighters making their mixed martial arts debut. And then before that, it was two fighters who don't even have not Wikipedia, but Tapology pages. So hard to find a lot of footage on Lemos too. Was able to find a little bit. She's utilizes leg kicks quite a bit. She's fights in orthodox and throws her right kick pretty frequently to keep her opponents back. She's good at landing counters. Sometimes she gets pressed up against the cage, and I'll say that 1 second. But Lemos also has a really good guillotine choke. She was able to utilize that in one of her fights that I saw, but takes quite a bit of risk. But the reason I'm picking Leslie Smith, not just because of the advantage that I think she'll have based off her experience, but I mentioned that Amanda Lemos has suffered with pressure. She lands really good counter shots, but Leslie Smith is good at counters and also leading the charge with her punches and also her aggressiveness. And for that reason, I think Leslie Smith is going to be able to get the victory in this one. Has the ability to get a finish, I think, depending on how scrappy these two get, because they do like to throw on the feet. So this could be a pretty entertaining fight, but I do think that we're going to see a decision because Leslie Smith has only finished one fighter in the past 4 or 5 years, and Lemos is still undefeated. But I favor Leslie Smith in this one. Definitely, I think she'll take a pretty clear 30-27 across the board.
Yep, I agree, man. Something to take into consideration if we're talking about Leslie going back and forth with wins and losses is this is the second time in a row where she's going to welcome a debutante to the octagon. So that's in her favor to get a second victory in a row. Both of these ladies are going to be pressing forward most of the time, but Leslie's going to be pressing forward 100% of the time, where Lemos sometimes decides to just kind of hang out and stand there. I don't think she'll be able to deal with the constant, relentless forward pressure of Leslie Smith. Lemos hasn't fought since 2016, June of 2016, so just a year and a month, 13 months removed from competing. Perhaps her cardio won't be able to hold up to the whole thing. Octagon jitters are the real deal. Then you're on top of the octagon jitters, on top of ring rust, you're dealing with a lady that's going to be pressing forward for 15 minutes. That's not a very good thing for her. And also Lemos, even though she's been to, I think she might have been a 5-round fight. Shoot, I should look at it. I can't remember. I know she's fought one girl twice, and she redeemed herself the second time they fought. Or maybe the first one went to a draw. Nonetheless, she seems to throw her whole body into every single strike. You know, she throws full power into all of her strikes, where Leslie Smith is just touching, just touch. You know, a lot of coaches just tell them, touch her face. That's all Leslie Smith has to do. And occasionally she'll go in for the clinch and move in from a combination to get in on a single leg. Perhaps that could threaten Smith a little bit, could throw her off her game. But like I said, I'm picking Smith because I don't think that Lemos will be able to stay at the pace that Smith wants to set. The year layoff, her being her UFC debut, it's her first fight outside of Brazil. So a lot of X factors going against Lemos. And, yeah, I'm definitely picking Leslie Smith. And, man, I don't know. Leslie Smith isn't somebody who you should bet on, but I'm crazy. And I almost like Leslie Smith on a bet there. I just don't think Lemos is going to be able to contend with her. Talk me out of it.
I don't know if I should talk you out of it because I agree. And it's not the fact that Leslie Smith isn't really a finisher. And it's not the fact that she's been pretty inconsistent. It's the fact that you said it. Amanda Lemos has not really fought the best competition. She hasn't really had the best victories over fighters. The best record of a fighter that she's beat is, I guess, 2-0-1. She had a draw with the girl in her last fight and then beat her. But every other opponent are 0-0. And before that, they don't even have Tapology pages like I mentioned. So I'm pretty confident and almost extremely confident in your regard that Leslie Smith is guaranteed a victory in this one. But then again, I don't want to be too overconfident.
And I'm feeling about it. I feel like Leslie Smith is one of my most confident picks on the entire card. Talking me into it all night, Wes. Look at you go. You're so, what do you call it? You're so
persuasive.
Persuasive. Yeah, that's exactly it. Man, you're just you got that silver tongue, huh?
I try to do whatever I can, man. I love to help my brothers.
All right, so give me your prediction for fight of the night.
Man, I was taking a look at it. Some of these fights definitely have abilities to be a fight of the night, but I think if some of the fights I think have stylistic abilities to be a fight of the night, we could see a finish. I'm going to go with my fight of the night as Stevie Ray versus Paul Felder, based off their styles. I think due to the durability and the fact that they don't really get knocked out quite a bit, and the fact they do get knockouts quite a bit, we could see quite a bit of action take place on the feet. So that's my pick for fight of the night.
I might go with Danny Roberts versus Bobby Nasty Nash. Just Bobby Nash's style really lends itself to getting fight of the night. And his last fight against Lee the Leech Jingliang did not get fight of the night, even though that was super fun, 9 minutes and 45 seconds. But they gave out 4 performance bonuses instead. I guess those performances were deserving of it, but I just feel like Bobby Nash's style will really lend itself to being fight of the night. And if it's not that, my second choice would be Calderwood Calvillo. So what are your predictions for performance bonuses?
I think I'd also give my second choice for Joanne Calderwood versus Cynthia Calvillo. I think that you like to say the word ebbs and flows. I feel like that's a fight that could definitely have some ebbs and flows in it. My 2 performances that I think are likely in this one, it's hard to deny Gunnar Nelson a bonus. I feel like no matter what he's going to do, if he's able to get a finish in this fight, it's going to earn him a bonus. And, I mean, it doesn't really have to be impressive. I think no matter what we'll see happen, he's in a main event. He's got a big name, and he's going to be fighting in front of a lot of people that cheer him on. I think Gunnar Nelson's definitely guaranteed a bonus if he gets the finish. So Gunnar Nelson's one, and I'm going to have to go the second one, and you're probably going to be mad at me that I'm taking it, but I love it. I really think Galore Bofando has a chance to get a bonus in this one, just because after me watching some of the tape, I'm really impressed with his unorthodox striking abilities, and I feel like we could see something wild happen in the fight to where he's able to get some kind of maybe spinning hook kick knockout over Charlie Ward, who I don't think really has the best chin. And I really apologize because I did see a reaction. So I'm going to assume that you took the same. If I had to take another one, though, I'm going to go Gunnar Nelson versus Khalil Rountree, and I'll take that just to give you your fight.
No, that's fine. We can take the same ones, man. But yeah, I thought I was going to be like, I'm pulling a fast one here. Nobody's going to see it coming. Nobody knows who Galore Bofando is. But fuck yeah, man. I think that if there was a dark horse of this fight card, you look at UFC.com, the guy doesn't even have a picture on there. He's definitely my person to watch, a person to pay attention to. If you only want to watch the main card, nah, man. Tune in for the prelims and watch Galore Bofando. I hope that we don't eat our words, Wes, but I'm fucking super pumped for Galore Bofando. So that's, yeah, I'm going to go with Galore and Nelson too, probably. And if not Nelson, then Rountree. You took them all from me. That's it. That's precisely it. We didn't do it at the beginning, so let's do it now instead. What pre-fight letter grade would you give the card?
I actually like this card. Do you know real quick when this card is going to be happening?
Yeah, it starts at noon your time on Sunday.
I'll be able to watch it. So I am pretty hyped about that. I have to work on Saturday, so I'm going to definitely be tuning in a little bit for this card, hopefully all of it if I can. But To be honest, I actually love this card. I like a lot of the fights that are going down on it. I think there's some debutants that can definitely do some impressive stuff like Bofando and maybe even Danny Henry or Daniel Teymur in that fight. So, and even the main card, I mean, they're definitely not the biggest names that you're going to see. Gunnar Nelson's probably the biggest one that you will find, but I really like this card. I think it's pretty underrated. Maybe not necessarily the name value, like I was saying, but definitely in the fight value. I think a lot of these could be entertaining. So I'm going to go a solid B on this card. I was thinking about a B minus if I wanted to take away from name, but I do enjoy this card. Actually, I'm going to go B minus because I definitely say some pay-per-views are B material. So I'm going to say B minus, but I definitely think that this card has the ability to exceed my expectations when it's all said and done.
I like it, Wes. I really do. I think it was Albert Morales who was doing an interview with James Lynch. I mentioned James Lynch in his interviews a bunch of times already. I love them. They really helped me prepare for this show. They helped me get to know the fighters prior to the event and all that jazz. But I think it was Albert Morales who said on his interview with James Lynch that since Silva has left as matchmaker, now we have Mick Maynard and who else?
I can't.
Sean Shelby.
Yeah.
Yeah, since we have those guys making the cards, it seems like the ones that have like no name value, they just try to make the most exciting fights possible. And I feel like that's what we have here. I mean, there isn't one that you could look at that's really going to be like, that one, you know, I'm not really looking forward to that one stylistically. All of it from bottom to top, top to bottom, left to right, upside to downside. Phenomenal card. Stylistically, the matchups, and I'm giving it a B plus. I grade on a curve. I like you. I'm stoked that this is happening in the middle of the afternoon, so I don't have to do the rearview mirror, the post-fight shows. I stayed up until 4 a.m. doing the rearview mirror and then putting it as a podcast last week for UFC 213. That's not very enjoyable. So getting to be done with a fight card at 6 p.m. Eastern time and being able to be like done working in time to go to sleep at 10 p.m. my time, that's going to be awesome for me. And like you mentioned in the chat, it's great for UK fans. So yeah, I'm pumped. Wes, do you want to cover a geeked outside of mixed martial arts before we head out of here? You got anything that you've been doing in the past 7 days?
I guess I could say one because I don't think I talked about it in the last one. Maybe I did, but I got a new job. Did I talk about that in the last?
Nope. Go ahead.
I didn't. So I got a new job, and I'm actually working as it's called a course starter. That's probably the best way to say it. I'm technically a floater, which means I can float from position to position, but pretty much my main thing is being a floater, and it's at a resort that's about 30 minutes away from where I live. And pretty much what I do, all these golfers come that are going to be playing on the course. They'll first come to me. They'll park the cart. I'll go up to them, say, hey, man, how's it going? Or hey, lady, how's it going? I'll take their bags. I'll put it on the carts for them. I pretty much either at that point can give them directions as to what to do, how the golf course is going to be playing today, where to drive your golf cart, where to be careful when you're driving your golf cart, where the restrooms are, so on and so forth. Then I direct them up to the pro shop. Then they go out on their merry way. They'll come back to me later. I'll unload them, ask hey man, how was your round today? And I'll unload their bags off the cart, park their cart for them, and just wish them a good time. Thanks for visiting at the resort if they are from out of town. And I've been making some pretty decent tips. I've met some pretty cool people from pretty much all around the United States, and no one outside of the U.S. yet, but it's definitely possible being at a resort. And I've been geeking out about it. I've been making some pretty decent tips and just enjoying a lot of the people that I work with and the people that I see on a daily basis.
Eric Stevens just arrived, and he said sorry he didn't get here sooner, so we didn't get to see our picks. I'm sorry you didn't get here sooner either, Eric, but you can subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, all of that stuff. Wherever you can find a podcast, you can find MMA Mania and all of the work that I, Flyin Brian J, do. I often have guests like Wesley Riddle. Or you can check us out. Just go back to the beginning after we stop the broadcast and check it out on YouTube. Wesley, I've been wanting to ask you in chat for a while, Have you ever made a hole-in-one?
I've made hole-in-ones on things that are not golf courses, so like par 3 courses where it's just a little fun place you can go out and play. I think I've got three. I would say 4, but I feel like there wasn't a 4th. I'm pretty sure I've had 3, but none on a real golf course.
So it's got greens, it's got grass around it. There's a hole you put your ball in. There's trees, there's sand at these places.
The sand is your bunker, and the green is pretty much.
So to me, that's a real golf course, man.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. You know, I don't know why I was trying to act like you didn't know what you were doing. It's a course that isn't mandated or controlled by an actual pro shop. It's pretty much where you go out kind of at free will and play for more so fun and enjoy the experience of something that doesn't have a set goal or a set par that you should accomplish in, let's say, a professional game or on an actual 18-hole golf course. These are more like 9 holes, or you can go around and play 18 holes of the same 3 holes, just something like that.
Okay. The reason I ask is because I've been thinking about a nickname for you.
Okay.
What do you think about Wes or Wesley hole-in-one Riddle?
Dude, I need to get one, but I love it.
Or
I think it's perfect.
I had another idea. If you hadn't ever made a hole-in-one, I had another one loaded up for you. I forget what it was. Like Wesley Golf Pro Riddle. I like Wesley hole-in-one Riddle. I like it.
I like it, dude. Maybe I'll make that my Twitter name for a little bit and just see how it flows.
Eric Stevens on DraftKings. He's going heavy on Gunnar Nelson and Brett Johns. I like it. And he says possibly Calvillo because he loves her style.
You don't do DraftKings, do you?
No, I don't. I sometimes play, like, they have free games where you could possibly win some money, and I've won a couple of dollars there, and so then once I win those dollars, then I'll use those dollars and pay to play games. But no, I don't usually play. I also gave my Twitter account to DraftKings for like a month so that they could send out tweets to get people to sign up. And so I got a couple of dollars from that, and I basically used it to gamble on DraftKings, and I lost it.
It's pretty fun. I mean, if you want to just do some fantasy, I don't know. I guess you don't really call it betting. You're just putting a team together. I don't know what the best way to say.
Man, it's fucking gambling.
Then gambling.
Call a spade a spade. It's gambling.
Then gambling. Yeah, it's pretty much a fun way, but I'm doing it for free just to kind of see how I do by putting up teams together. And I made one for this fight card. I usually do all the time, but I think it's pretty fun just trying to figure out and work with the cheap fighters that you have who you think might be able to get a victory. And then, yeah, I'll actually give you my team. 1 second. I'll share it with anybody that likes to use DraftKings. If you're trying to make up a team, this is the team I put together. I put first off Galore Bofando. I think he's going to be able to get a victory. This is also a way. Whenever I'm trying to put together a DraftKings team, I think of the fighters who have the ability to get finishes and get finishes faster first. And then I think of the fighters secondly who I think has a good chance and a very realistic chance to get a victory no matter how they get the victory. So I've got Bofando on my team. I've got Danny Henry. I do like his ability and having the hometown advantage. I've got Jack Marshman because I think he'll be able to stop his opponent in Ron James. I've got Bobby Nash because I was low on money and I thought that it would be good to throw somebody as cheap as him on there just because he does have the ability with his wrestling style and also striking to get a victory. I've got Gunnar Nelson because I'm pretty confident he'll be able to submit at some point in the fight Santiago Ponzinibbio. And then I've got Alexandre Pantoja. I don't know how to say his name, but Pantoja. I think we talked about that earlier. I've got Pantoja because I think he'll be able to get a pretty decisive victory over Seery.
I like it, man. If I were to make a team, my anchors would be Bofando and Brett Johns, because Brett Johns averages, well, he only had one fight, but he had 118.5 points. I think you get takedowns at will, land a shitload of strikes, and even if he doesn't get a finish, he's going to score a lot with his takedown. So I would play Brett Johns and Galore Bofando. And Bofando isn't that crazy expensive, so I like that, and I like that you're playing Bobby Nash because he's the cheapest fighter on the entire card. And I think that he could, even if he were to lose, he could land some takedowns on Danny Roberts and score some points as a losing fighter. But as the cheapest fighter on the card, he has potential to score a lot of points, perhaps. So I like it, Wesley. If I'm going to say something that I've geeked out about a lot lately in the past 7 days, a couple of times I've already talked about bonsai trees. I've been geeking out about bonsai trees. Well, it turned into just plain mother effing trees. I've been loving trees lately. I'm a tree hugger. It's weird. So my girlfriend and I would go on walks, and I see trees. I'm like, what kind of tree is that? I really want to know what kind of tree is that. Then I use arborday.org or arborday.com or something to try to figure out what kind of tree it is. You can do like, does it have this kind of leaf? And you're like, it has that kind of leaf. And you hit it, and I can never get it right. I was like, fuck, I don't know. I said something wrong because it throws out a bunch of tree terms at me. Well, today for my job, I went to a park that had a bunch of trees, and by every fucking tree, it had a post by it that said what type of tree it was. So I took a picture of them all, and I'm going to study it so I can get my tree knowledge up and then decide which one of them I could cut a branch off and propagate it into a bonsai tree. So I'm stoked about that. Getting back to fights quick, Eric Stevens, my whole thing on John is that I got burned with no exposure to Guida, and then Maynard last week, not missing the rest of their points with Johns this weekend. Yeah, great point. Guida probably scored a shitload, right?
He had to. I didn't have him on my team, but he had to score a lot of points.
Yeah, so don't miss. To me, DraftKings has scored a little bit funny because why are we putting so much stock in these wrestlers? You know, like sure, a takedown is worth a lot for the fight, but like a punch to the face, a real hard punch to the face is, I don't know. The scoring's strange. You got to play the game. I guess it's gambling mixed with a game. So there's that. So yeah, definitely get the takedowns with Brett Johns, and that's another reason to play Bobby Nash. He has that in his back pocket. If he decides to not go for super exciting fights and he goes back to his Michigan State wrestling style, he could definitely grind out Danny Roberts. It's definitely possible, but he hasn't shown that. He didn't show that against Li Jingliang. Of course, the Leech has good wrestling, but he also had never showed that before his UFC appearance.
And that's one thing I worried about picking him because he hasn't really shown it, but he definitely has the abilities, if he fights a little bit smarter, to kind of implement that game plan.
Yeah, and then Rountree, well, let me make a team. I don't have the money in there, but let me see. I'll make a team quickly. Oh, man. Well, Calderwood is cheap at that price. Stevie Ray, Paul Felder. Well, fuck. No, not Calderwood. Calvillo's going to get takedowns, I think. So Calvillo. Let me see if I like Rountree. I like Bobby Nash. I like Bofando. I like Smith to have high output. And finally, I don't have many options left. Oh, gosh.
That's the thing that's hard, man.
Ugh. Stevie Ray. I don't know. What do you think of that team?
I think it's pretty good. I mean, you put it together pretty quick, but I think that there was definitely a lot of potential on that.
Eric, yeah, the Leech, Bobby Nash last fought Lee the Leech Jingliang in typical Lee the Leech fashion. He hurt the Leech a bunch of times, back and forth. And then all of a sudden, the Leech put a right straight on his chin that sent him into the nether realm, put him into sleeping mode, curled him up like this. So pretty much that. So that's the end of the show. Wesley, at the beginning, I forgot to tell people where to find you. So tell them where to find you.
I've got one question to ask you. Can I ask you real quick?
Yeah.
It's probably putting you on the spot a little bit but I was definitely curious. If you weren't to choose a bonsai tree, what is your favorite tree that you would like to maybe have growing in your yard? Or what is your favorite tree? Do you have one?
Oh, man, I've been all over the place lately. Today I found one. I see this one in my town all the time, and I like, oh my gosh, I love that tree because it's dark green, but it has yellow speckles in it. Little leaf linden. that would be pretty cool, especially because it already has little leaves. So if you could shrink the bonsai and then you do stuff with the roots to make it so the leaves get smaller, I think that would be a really pretty bonsai tree. But the ones that I like looking at the most on videos and stuff are purple Japanese maples. They're, they got the small maple leaves and then they're purple. And there's also one called Jacaranda Mimiosophilia, some shit. The Jacaranda, I don't know, it's fucking purple. Super cool. And then it's got a nice fragrance. I just propagate. So the short answer is I don't know if I have a favorite tree, but I just propagated some branches off of a crab tree. And have you ever been around a crab tree when it blossomed?
I'd imagine
crab apple tree. Sorry, crab apple tree.
I think I have, but I don't know or ever recall where I was like, wow. I felt like just going up to one, but I do enjoy trees.
Dude, they smell so fucking good when they – so crab apples, they're normally like a purplish color. They're kind of green. They obviously have tiny little crab apples. And then in the spring – they blossom and they turn into like the tree looks totally white and it has white flowers all over it and it just smells magnificent. So if I could get one of those to turn into a bonsai and then blossom in my apartment, it would just smell amazing.
That would be pretty sick, man. And I mean, and they can grow apples?
No, they're crab apples. So they're like, they turn into around the size of my finger. Boop.
Dude, I think one thing that was one of my favorite things about being a kid and thinking about trees, and this may be pretty cliche, but I loved looking at pictures of just trees that have perfect apples that are hanging off the limbs. I love apple trees. There's just something so pretty and natural about it. It's just, I feel like if I were to walk up and find a tree just in the middle of the forest, wow, look at all these apples. And I could just go up and pluck them right off the tree.
Did you know that studies have shown that just looking at pictures of nature, being in nature is the best, but looking at pictures of nature increases people's cognitive function and makes them happier, makes them smarter, makes them think quicker?
I didn't think about it, but I definitely believe it.
Yeah. I have to go circle back to your question. You love apples. When I was a kid, a tiny little kid, walking to the store with my mom or whatever, walking to the mailbox, I used to collect pine cones. I know it's super weird, but I collected pine cones, and I love pine trees, and I still, to this day, I love looking at pine cones. And, so I'll walk by one tree all the time, and each time you walk by it, you can see its pine cones progress from, being like nothing to turning into like a green little hard thing to turning into a full-blown pine cone and falling, or, a blossomed pine cone and falling off. And I have a pine bonsai. It's a white pine, and I have one that's a blue spruce, which is similar. But so I don't know. Maybe my favorite's the pine tree. White pines have needles that aren't like, they're not very stiff. They feel kind of like if you pluck grass, they're as noodly as grass, and they're not as like sharp, pointy at the end. Kind of cool.
It's amazing to learn about just all the, different kinds of trees, but also I've always been a fan of autumn or fall. I love watching
so pretty,
trees.
Right?
It's absolutely beautiful, man. Like just watching leaves fall off trees, seeing the different colors, something about it, and it doesn't really matter what the tree is necessarily. It's just something about that, the naturality of it, watching the kind of nature take over in a different form of atmosphere and environment, and just it's just pretty masterful.
You're right. It is masterful, man. But anyway, yeah, I think we should probably get out of here. So tell them where to find you.
Yeah, let's finish on my Twitter. If you want to give me a follow over there, I'd appreciate it. Is All That MMA at All That MMA. Feel free to give me a follow over there. I love to have communication with everybody about mixed martial arts. It's my favorite hobby, and also something I'm hoping to get into a lot more one day. So feel free to give me a follow over there. Also, I do some writing over at MMAsucker.com. Not too active right now, trying to finish up a summer school class that I have, but as soon as I'm finished with that, I'm going to definitely have some more time to write and hopefully get out some matchmaking articles, which is one of my favorite things to do. I love trying to talk about fights to make next, and I'm hopefully going to be able to push out one maybe after I take an exam that I have on Tuesday, but to write one up for this Nelson Ponzinibbio card after it is all finished. But as always, thanks again, Brian, for having me on the show. Always have a good time, and thanks to everybody for tuning in.
Thanks so much for joining me, Wes. Thanks to all the listeners for tuning in. If you haven't already, please give the video a thumbs up. If you're listening on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, wherever it is, please give us a rating, a thumbs up. I don't care if you give us a rating of a 1 or a 9,000. Just give it to us and also tell us why. Perhaps we could make the show a little better. I can't make my voice any better, and I can't make myself prettier, but I could make the show ever so slightly better. So thanks so much for joining us, guys. And we will see you, or I will see you at least before these fights on Sunday. It's called the MMA Preamble, and we'll basically go over the same thing kind of again, but it will be live on MMA Mania's Facebook page. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you later. Namaste.